afternoon's meeting is to inform the general public about a very important conference that is coming up in May. The St. Kitts Nevis National Commission for UNESCO is partnering with the Nevis Island Administration through the Ministry of Communication, Physical Planning, Natural Resources and Environment to host an extremely significant environmental policy planning and formulation conference. This afternoon we have our esteemed Minister, the Honorable Youthan Troy Liburd, as well as Mr. Antonio Maynard, the Secretary General of the UNESCO, as well as Dr. Layton Narain. He is the co-chair for this conference. We will now hear remarks from our Minister, Mr. Liburd.
Good afternoon, everybody. My ministry is very pleased to be associated with this conference, as it will help us to have a clearer understanding of the dynamic relationship between our behavior and how it affects the physical environment, as well as how elements within our environment impact upon us. This conference offers us in St. Kitts and Nevis a view of our environmental issues on several fronts and is a tangible step toward the strengthening of existing policies and the development and implementation of new ones. I wish to applaud UNESCO and their partners on this endeavor. On behalf of our Premier, my Senior Minister, the Nevis Island Administration, and indeed the people of Nevis and the people of St. Kitts and Nevis as a whole, I wish to pledge the full support to this conference and its outcomes.
Thank you, Mr. Liburd. And he has pledged the ministry's support in addressing the policy direction in dealing with some of our environmental issues, such as sand mining, the removal of material from guts. And his support is important and significant as we put policies and regulations in place to address these environmental degradation and hopefully give ourselves a more pristine environment to live in. Now we will hear from the UNESCO Secretary General, Mr. Maynard.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The UNESCO National Commission is very pleased to be partnering with the Nevis Island government through its Ministry of Physical Planning in hosting this very important and timely conference. We are expecting approximately 25 overseas delegates to attend this conference. These include government ministers, government officials, CARICOM and OECS officials, as well as civil society and NGO groups, as well as other UN agencies. In the framework of UNESCO's action aimed at supporting CARICOM member states and in strengthening their capacity in social science data production and use of evidence-based policy formation and planning for sustainable development is the main motive behind this particular conference. We hope to validate and discuss certain main reports commissioned by UNESCO at this conference, and at the end of the day we are hoping that we can in fact sensitize the general population of St. Kitts and Nevis, but Nevis in particular, on the issue of climate change and environmental policy formation as we move forward to adopt to climate change and to promote these policies accordingly. In fact, and of course, this conference will be led by two able, qualified social and natural scientists in the persons of Dr. Noreen and Miss Claudia Walwin. And we have a lot of confidence that they will do justice to this particular conference, as well as the steering committee that was recently established in order to implement this very important conference. I also want to say that we are very much supported by the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Physical Planning, Mr. Stapleton, who has been up to now one of the major stakeholder in all of this. From a UNESCO perspective, I want to, and on behalf of my minister, I want to urge the general population of Nevis in particular to take ownership of this particular conference, because it will help to build capacity in this program area among the school children and the population itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Maynard. As the Secretary General for United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, he has laid the background information before you regarding the scientific part of this conference, that it will be based on research and documentation, and at the end we're hoping to come away with policy formulation and planning for environmental sustainability. With that said, I'll hand you over to Dr. Noreen. He is the co-chair.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, Ms. Walwin, and thank you, Honorable Minister Liebert, and Mr. Maynard, and of course our Permanent Secretary for the Environmental Ministry here. Thank you for the opportunity to, for Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College, who I represent, to be a partner on this, to demonstrate the research capacity of the college by way of students and lecturers, and how we can ably host this conference here in Nevis. I will get more specifically into the nature of the conference. You would recall there was a conference, a climate change conference on adaptation strategies in the Caribbean, dealing with science, ethics, and policies back in 2011, where UNESCO made a commitment to deploy expertise and competencies to improve the science, one, to enhance the awareness and general agreement on internationally on ethical principles relating to climate change, and also to formulate policies. And policies in this sense must mean action. And this conference now is about action. We have already dealt with the part about the ethical principles in Havana last week, where we looked at the world equilibrium, where there were 44 countries represented and almost 2,000 participants. And they looked at the ethical principles relating to climate change in the context of sustainable development. And previously we had a conference in Tortola following the St. Kitts conference on climate change education for sustainable development, in which I made a keynote address. So I'm very pleased to participate in this one and make this happen. Our function here is really to host the conference. But when we do that, we have the opportunity to draw attention to the local issues here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And in this case, I would say Nevis, we want to emphasize that because it's hosted here, and the last one we hosted in St. Kitts. So we want to have a good balance between the issues there and here in terms of the physical environment. But it's not only about the physical environment. This conference is it's really the sectors of UNESCO, which you call the social and human services, as well as the MOST, or the management of social transformation. They look at how science affects people's lives, how does the issue of climate change, what do we do with that knowledge about climate change? How can we interpret the knowledge from scientists in that area as that will affect human beings, society, lives and livelihoods? And therefore, there's a multidisciplinary perspective to this. But the emphasis, I would say, is on the social dimension, the social science aspect of it. And in the social sciences, we want to emphasize local experiences, local knowledge. We can actually take local knowledge and help to improve the natural science. But also we want to be able to interpret the information. How are people affected? And therefore, how can we build resilience in our communities where we can assist people to adapt to changing conditions in the environment? So adaptation makes more sense where mitigation has failed. Technology can solve lots of the answers for mitigation, and that's what we've been doing for centuries. We have found out pretty much all over the world that it doesn't take us very far. When we are hit by intensive storms, anywhere in the world, even in developed countries, people are affected. We lose lives, and livelihoods are affected. We want to draw attention here in this conference to the importance of education. And in that, we have identified education gaps, and we also noticed that the education and the knowledge behind this is fragmented in the Caribbean. We have found this. And there are two agencies, research agencies in the Caribbean, that will be presenting at this conference, where we will have the opportunity, along with other participants in the region and outside of the region as well. We will have officials and experts from UNESCO itself. But we will help to validate those reports and show the relevance to our local community here and, of course, in the rest of the region. While we do this, there are many benefits that can be derived here for the island of Nevis in the first instance. And we want to do the best job that we can, as we did in the previous conference when it was hosted in St. Kitts. We want to do the best job that we can to put St. Kitts on the world stage. It will be on the world stage, but we want to be able to eventually draw projects, real projects, action to the issue of environmental policy and planning for the Caribbean. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Narain. And there you've had it. Dr. Narain gave you a brief look into some of the conferences that he has recently been a part of. So this is not new, but it gives Nevis a chance to shape something of significant importance as it relates to the sustainability of our environment and our environmental health. At this time, we will entertain any questions or clarification that you...
Sure. Almond Desa, Advantage Communications. I have a question which I think Dr. Narain, you can tackle, probably also Mr. Maynard.
Sure.
I'm always fascinated with these international projects, so to speak. Well, projects that are funded by international agencies, whereby we have a lot of talk, very little action, and the end product of the talk does not reach the masses, who are the critical links at the end of the day. In this case, we're talking climate change and its effects and challenges and so on. I'm just curious to find out how much or how if you're satisfied with the information flow from the technocrats to the ordinary man on the street, especially in the Caribbean and specifically St. Kitts Nevis, in terms of the education on the impacts and effects of climate change.
All right, I appreciate the question, and it is a concern that I've always expressed at conferences, that I don't like to be on the conference circuit. That's one of the things I've told many international agencies, that what I like to see is action. there's the rhetoric, and there's more rhetoric, but at some point in time we need action. And that is exactly what this conference will be about, where in the first conference we identified the challenges that we had in terms of education gap, the fragmentation of information, and the accessibility of that information by local citizens, communities, various interest groups, all interest groups, all members of society. And now is where we need to get some action by identifying what those gaps are, and also establish a clearinghouse for that information, an information base where the information can be interpreted at various levels, not only in the education system, but also at non-formal education. And it's also about interpreting what local residents are saying, various interest groups in society. What are they saying? How can we then take that to make science? So we are already at the action. Another piece of action that we already had as a deliverable from that conference was to improve the knowledge, and not only the knowledge but the science, the data. And UNESCO has already deployed expertise and competencies to identify where to locate the monitoring mechanism or instruments in our coastal waters to identify changes in sea level, changes in temperature, and some other variables. And there are other variables that can be mapped with the same instrument. Recently, there has been interest by the USAID as well on a similar project. And my question was, how are these international agencies collaborating on the same issues? Are they duplicating efforts? And one of the problems that we do have, which you have touched on, and I share the sentiment there, is that many of these multinational agencies may fund similar projects, but they talk past each other, they lack communication. And my question to them always is, how can we set up then an intersectoral platform? I think that makes more sense. So we build on what is there, and we build capacity by strengthening the relationships among these international agencies as well as local agencies, rather than duplicating them. So we have to be cautious about that. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but this conference is an action one, where we'll validate the report and actually make policies and implement. How do we plan and implement projects? Policy is an important science, but many policy analysts and those who formulate policies and decision makers, they sometimes do not design policies with features, with implementation features, where there would be performance measures, evaluations, and all that. Sometimes the last thing they want to hear about is an evaluation that tells them that policy has failed. But this is what this conference is going to address, the planning and implementation of particular policies for the region.
This is an opportunity for the citizens of Nevis in particular to take ownership. We have to take ownership of this conference, and in particular the program area that is at hand. And I'm talking about all the stakeholders, and especially the media. The media must play a very important role in answering your question. We have to be able to get this information out to all the different stakeholders, including especially the man on the street, essentially. And so you're correct. Sometimes there's a lot of talk, but sometimes if we do the right things, we should be able to impact the common man on this particular issue. The question is, and I usually want to get away from the regular jargons as it relates to this, because most people won't understand him anyway. How in a nutshell, or in simple terms, can we resist the impact of climate change or the next few hurricanes that will impact Nevis? How could we protect the poor persons who are living on a hill somewhere in Gingerland, to make sure that he could withstand another furious hurricane? What policies the government of Nevis would put in place after this conference to make sure that too many persons will not be hurt after another natural disaster. That is really the challenge that we have to face, and that is really the main outcome that we have to make sure in part to form this conference and in our policy formulation.
As you touch on that, a follow-up question, this one about the media, the role of the media, the critical link that the media provides. I have researched and found a lot of, if you might, conferences or workshops on pertaining to climate change and other issues that I think are relevant in terms of capacity development. Even for myself to be able to impart certain knowledge to my audience. But when you go down the, what do you call it, the information sheet, whether online or otherwise, you cannot afford, one, to buy a plane ticket to attend, but sure to participate in the conference, because everything is so exorbitant. My question is, what consideration can institutions or organizations like UNESCO provide to probably get the media more up to speed?
Again, this is one of the main reasons why we're having this conference on Nevis, because we know that Nevis have been, I would like to say marginalized, but not necessarily up to date with the information as it relates to the question you just asked. But suffice it to say that UNESCO have in the past held several conferences to train media workers on the issue of climate change. That has happened, and it will continue to happen. What I'm saying to you is that once we have this opportunity to welcome all the different international partners and policymakers here, we have to take advantage of it, including the media, in several ways, including the government ministers who are here to establish contacts, you know, and this conference will go out as a Nevis decoration and so forth. And this is how things should happen moving forward.
UNESCO is bringing this conference to Nevis, St. Kitts and Nevis, of course. It's the first sub-regional conference of this type where we are now making policies. First sub-regional conference in the world. There will be there are three of them. This is one of them. There will be two others. This will become a model, but this is where we don't necessarily have to travel somewhere. We're bringing it right here. We have to take advantage of this by having a large local delegation, and as well as local observers to this. That's an advantage that we'll have. Also, when we host a conference like this, we'll draw attention to our issues and projects. From the last climate change conference we have had here in 2011, some projects came our way and implemented, affecting fisher folk, farmers, and others. Mr. Maynard might be able to elaborate on that immediately. So there is an inherent advantage on that.
In addition to what you spoke about in terms of capacity building, not only for media workers, but for other people who work in this particular program area. International conferences, international fellowships, international workshops to build capacity within the island in terms of this subject area.
Just wanted to add that the NIA is fully behind this conference. We're backing it 100%, and we will deploy, the full backing of the NIA with people from Planning, Public Works, and Ministry of Health. Other relevant ministries will all be involved, and we want to ask the media houses to get on board in some way, and the general public as a whole, whatever contribution we can make to take hold of this conference and own it as our own conference, and bring our own issues to the fore. Whoever has an issue, you know, maybe make a note of it, take it to the relevant department, even maybe the Ministry of Communication, and have your issue aired, so that when this conference comes to bear, that all the issues are there, and we can fully benefit from it.
This is Sazam Hall from Nevis Pages. This question is for Dr. Ryan.
Yes. Okay.
You made mention of 2 regional agencies that will be attending this upcoming conference. Which country or countries are these agencies located, and what wealth of experience they have before coming to this conference? As when were they founded?
Yeah. One of them is the Carib Safe Partnership. It was a partnership that was founded with the headquarters in Barbados, but it was formulated in partnership with the Climate Change Center for the Caribbean. We call the 5 Cs, headquartered in Belize, but the Carib Safe Partnership is headquartered in Barbados. They collaborated with experts experts or professors from Oxford University, and they have formed this Carib Safe Partnership. Carib Safe Partnership is a research agency that had already done work throughout the Caribbean with EU funding and other multinational agency funding in other parts of the world. But they came to St. Kitts and Nevis already and did some needs assessment, and they have put together what we call the risk atlas for the Caribbean in terms of extreme weather conditions, whether it be droughts or floods. And it's not only about droughts or floods, it's the rapid change between one and the other, the abrupt changes between one and the other. And it's also not only about intense storms, but how rapidly a storm changes from being a low category to a high intensity storm. So they have done all these studies. They have looked at vulnerabilities, and they have looked at opportunities, all right? Or you can call them risks, and what kind of strategies can we do to intervene. So they're coming up with a series of recommendations pertaining to the studies that they have carried out region-wide. And they were here, they conducted workshops, they consulted with stakeholders throughout the Caribbean, but also in St. Kitts and Nevis. And I'm familiar with their work. They also participated in other regional conferences and other conferences outside of the region. The Canary, which is a research institute out of Trinidad, I believe, but they're a regional body, because what they have are experts from various countries in the region. In as much as one may be headquartered in Belize or Barbados or Trinidad, they have experts that are from various territories in the Caribbean, and sometimes they bring experts from outside of the region to bear upon this research. So when they bring their reports, they're commissioned by UNESCO. They will present the reports, and that's what our job here, as well as other participants that we'll be inviting to this conference from the region, outside of those 2 agencies, and also from UNESCO headquarters in Paris, as well as the cluster office in Jamaica. They'll send officials and experts. We will be able to validate those reports, examine them critically, and don't forget our local capacity. We don't have to always go outside of the country or outside of the region for expertise. We have expertise here as well, and that's why the Clarence Fitzroy Barrett College is a part of this. I represent the college, but we have done significant research. We have our own Ms. Walwyn here, co-chair. They're aware of the issues that we have. We also are partnering with the Ministry of Sustainable Development and Environment in St. Kitts, where we will do our own research and demonstrate, not only demonstrate, but illustrate that these are our issues, and we are capable of tabling these issues and making them known. So we're not doing this alone. Apart from looking at research itself, the science itself, we're collaborating with social scientists, natural scientists, politicians, elected officials, of course from here, but also from outside of the country. We're looking at elected officials from other Caribbean territories. And so we will be in a room with perspectives from various dimensions, including the private sector. and local residents. All right. So it is quite a comprehensive, quite a good mix in terms of being able to analyze what will be presented to us.
Well, I'd just like to say that the UNESCO conference on environmental policy formulation and planning will be held over the period 15th and 16th of May 2013, right here on Nevis. We already have a steering committee in place with various stakeholders across the Federation from the private and public sector. So it is a partnership. It is all about teamwork. It is all about expanding upon the policies and legislation that we already have in place, strengthening them, as well as institutional and administrative strengthening so that we can have a healthy environment. And I would like to thank you, the media, for participating at this early stage, and we trust that you will get the word out for us.